In life, only three things are guaranteed: death, taxes, and war. They say war never changes, and while that may be true, the procedures, protocols, and battle doctrines all do change. And today we're talking about a man who set a precedent for every special operations unit in existence today. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about Robert Paddy Mayne, aka the Irish Lion. Our story starts on January 11th, 1915, when Robert Blair Mayne was born in Newtownards, Ireland. Now, as a boy, Paddy Mayne was somewhat of a prodigy, both physically and academically. He did extremely well in primary and secondary school, and with sports, he actually played rugby professionally both for Ireland and for the British Lions, and he hit like a Mack truck. Sorry, he hit like a lorry. Now, it was said that on the rugby field, if Paddy Mayne ever hit you or tackled you, you were not going to get up. He did not play to win, he played to obliterate. So not only was he physically gifted, academically inept, he also took up a liking to shooting. And his teachers would actually note how accurate and patient he was when he was doing his target shooting and practice at the rifle class during primary school. But that's just who Paddy Mayne is. He's smart, he's brutal, ruthless, but at the end of the day, he's a nice guy, genuinely nice guy, according to everyone around him on all accounts. He could beat you up at a bar and then buy you a drink and shake your hand right afterwards with no hard feelings. And that is going to take us into his military service. Okay, so February 1939, about 7 months before Nazi Germany invaded Poland, Paddy Mayne joined the 4th Battalion of Royal Ulster Rifles, which was a reserve unit, up until the following month when he received a commission in the Royal Artillery. March 1939 to April 1940, he was a part of 3 different anti-air regiments, the 8th, the 9th, and the 66th Anti-Air Regiments, the latter of the 3 being a heavy anti-aircraft battery. After that, he was then transferred back to the Royal Ulster Rifles as a reservist. Now, following the evacuation of Dunkirk, Winston Churchill called for a butcher and bolt style of raiding force, which Paddy Mayne volunteered for. Now, when he joined in the number 11 Commandos, which is the Scottish Commandos, and he first saw action in June of 1941 in the Syria-Lebanon campaign. Now, during the Battle of Litani River in Lebanon, Mayne would successfully lead a section of men in the battle against Vichy French forces, which was from the French state, officially named the French state. Now, official reports and witnesses state that Paddy Mayne saw a patch of dead ground in the Battle of Litani River, and that's where he led his section of men and charged machine gun nests with grenades, guns, and overwhelming bravery. Now, after the battle, Paddy Mayne was mentioned in dispatches, which at this point in time was a tremendous deal. Because at this point in time, eyewitness accounts were great, but a mention in dispatch would really help with your commanding officers trying to get you medals, rewards, recognition, things like that. So this is a huge deal for one of his first battles. Fast forward a little bit, Mayne's friend Ian McGonigal recommended him to Captain David Stirling for a new specialized unit in the British military. Now, McGonigal served with Mayne in the 11th Commandos and was now a part of the SAS, or Special Air Service, known only at this time as the Parachute Unit. Now, there's a couple conflicting reports on how the two actually met. Some reports say that he was actually in jail for hitting his commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Keyes. However, in Keyes' personal diary, he was never even there. He didn't come until the following day, and it was already after the trouble was over. Now, in Keyes' report, Mayne was in trouble, but he was in trouble for beating up Major Charles Napier on the night of June 21st, 1941, because Mayne got upset. Now, when I say Mayne got upset, there's a couple good reasons, and I don't blame him at all. So Major Charles Napier was second in command of the 11 commandos at this point in time. He did not take part in the Battle of Litani River, and secondly, when Mayne was gone in that battle fighting with the section of men, it is reported that Napier had gone and shot Mayne's dog for barking. I can't blame the guy for wanting to get a little get back. Now, June 23rd, 1941, the day after Keyes arrived at the camp and did the initial investigation, Mayne was relieved from the 11th Commandos, but it doesn't say whether or not he was arrested. Moving on. Alright, so he's no longer a member of the 11th Commandos, but he's in the British SAS, and from 1941 to the end of 1942, during the Western Desert Campaign, he was wreaking absolute havoc on German airfields, destroying everything. Now, the first operation behind the enemy lines in Sirte was an absolute disaster. Not a whole lot of reports are written on it, but the SAS was in real trouble of being completely disbanded. And that's where Paddy Mayne comes in. On the night of December 14th, 1941, Paddy Mayne led the very first successful raid on Tamet in Libya, where a bunch of aircraft and fuel dumps were stored and destroyed. Now, for this first successful raid, Paddy Mayne was awarded the Distinguished Service Order, and a couple of weeks later, he was promoted to lieutenant. And on February 24th, 1942, Paddy Mayne received another mention in dispatches, or dispatche. I don't know, don't really care, it sounds too French. Now, part of the official account of the Tamet raids reads as follows. The following damage was done on or in the vicinity of the aerodrome. Bombs were placed on 14 aircraft, 10 aircraft were damaged by having the instrument panels destroyed, bomb and petrol dumps were blown up, reconnaissance was made down to the seafront, but only empty huts were found. Several telephone poles were blown up, and some Italians were followed, and the hut they came out of was attacked by submachine gun fire, and bombs were placed on and around it. There appeared to be roughly 30 inhabitants. Damage inflicted, unknown. So the SAS is not messing around. If they know you're there, they're going to come find you. If you don't show up, they will hunt you down and then find you. I'm using the term find because this is on YouTube, and I gotta dance around it a little bit. Now, the SAS and Paddy Mayne were huge fans of Jeeps to start with, but Paddy Mayne had a great idea to mount machine guns on the Jeeps and then ride those in to the airfields or wherever they were at to inflict maximum damage and escape in as little time as possible. Violence of action is effective. Now, on the night of June 26, 1942, we would see all of that come to fruition. With Paddy Mayne, along with 18 armed jeeps, British and French commandos would attack the Sidi Hanesh airfield and destroy up to 40 German planes before making their escape. They only lost 3 jeeps and had 2 men KIA. Now, in January 1943, Captain David Sterling was captured by the enemy, and following that, the SAS was split into 2 parts. They had the Special Raiding Squadron and the Special Boat Service. Now, Paddy Mayne at this point in time had been promoted to Major and was put in charge of the Special Raiding Squadron. Now, Mayne led the Special Raiding Squadron throughout Sicily and Italy all the way through until the end of 1943, and by the end of it, he had received a bar onto his Distinguished Service Order. Now, following his service throughout Sicily and Italy, receiving the bar on his Distinguished Service Order, in January of 1944, Major Mayne was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel. He was then appointed commanding officer of the now reformed 1st SAS Regiment and led them with valor and courage through the rest of the campaigns in that Western theater. Those campaigns included serving in France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and at the end, so about mid-1945, he also fought all the way into Germany. Now, towards the end of the war, Paddy Mayne was faced with what I can only describe as one of the most horrific things humans have ever done to other humans. Now, reports say that Paddy Mayne was at the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp and witnessed firsthand exactly what was happening under the Nazis' watch. And according to his men, he was found behind one of the huts retching. This battle-hardened monster of a man was breaking. Following the end of the war, he received a second and third bar to his Distinguished Service Order, as well as the French Legion of Honor and the French Croix de Guerre. On his return to civilian life, he attempted to go back to being a solicitor and a secretary of law. However, his back pain and what we now know as severe PTSD really hindered him from doing that. Reports say he just kind of wandered through life, drinking as heavily as he possibly could, trying to forget. He would grab at weapons that weren't there every time a car drove by and backfired. Paddy Mayne was suffering and severely struggling and couldn't find the help. And I'm not sharing any sort of quotes from Paddy Mayne or anything from an interview because none exist, because he refused to talk about his time in the service. And from these accounts and these reports, I can see why. Now, on the night of Tuesday, December 13th, 1955, Lieutenant Colonel Paddy Mayne was attending a regular card game, having a few drinks with friends, and when he left at 4 o'clock in the morning, things went wrong. Nobody knows exactly what happened, as there was really no eyewitness account, but his car was found at the bottom of a ditch, plowed into a tree. Paddy Mayne had passed. At the request of his family, his headstone does not list any of his military service. It simply states Paddy Mayne, born 1915, died 1955. He was 40 years old. I do also want to note that throughout his entire military career, Paddy Mayne was recommended for the Victoria Cross several times. I believe 4 times he was recommended and denied, or downgraded, which is why he got the 3 bars for his Distinguished Service Order. Now, with that all being said, there are still petitions out today to posthumously award Paddy Mayne the Victoria Cross for his service in the Second World War. If you want to support this man and what he's done for really the military as a whole. I mean, even Special Operations Unit here in the U.S. used some of the tactics and doctrines that he wrote and created all the way back in the 1940s. Now, whether he cared about it or not, the man deserves it. Petition Parliament, petition your government if you live in the UK. Let's get this man posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross. He is a legend, and he absolutely deserves it. And that is the story of Paddy Mayne, aka the Irish Lion. Now, if you learned something or you like what I do, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to see anything else, let me know over in the comments section.